Hello, my name is Lindsay Weirich, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this beautiful bird using Derwent Graphtint Pencils. We're going to start off by sketching our bird on a piece of watercolor paper, and I recommend you use regular graphite for this so it doesn't dissolve when you're painting. And then we're going to go in with our graphitints and we're going to start adding in some color. This layer I like to call blocking in because you don't have to be too particular about technique. We're going to dissolve this layer with water, so it's basically just kind of assigning your colors. So some gray around the eyes, some reddish brown on the wings, some brown in the spots you see here and there, get your shadows in, that sort of thing. The Derwent Graphtint line of pencils are a tinted graphite, so they're water-soluble graphite that has just a hint of color. You won't see the color too strongly until you add the water though, so keep that in mind. I like to work in layers because this product can be used wet or dry, so it gives you kind of the best of both worlds. I'm trying to go with the colors that are closest to what I see in my reference photo. I'll be using the set of 12 throughout this project, but if you have the set of 24, you have even more colors, namely a little bit more in the yellow and brown range. Now I like to scribble off my pencils onto my masking tape. So that's one of my tips whenever I'm using water-soluble pencils. I tape my paper down on all four sides. That makes my paper not buckle when I add water. Then on the masking tape, I scribble my colors here and there because I can pick that up with my water brush like it's a palette, like it's paint on a palette, and I can add that in wherever I need a stronger dose of color. Or maybe I want to add more color in where my paper's wet and I don't want to go in with a pencil because it might add too dark of a line. So that's one of my best tips for whenever you're using a water-soluble pencil. You don't want to press too hard on this first layer. One thing that you may not be used to using the Graphtint pencils is how vibrant the color is once you add water. Even though it is a muted palette, it still is going to show a lot more color once you add water. It's going to go from more of the pencil look to a paint look. For the branch, I want to make sure it has some good shape and contrast. So I'm using some browns. I'm also going to be using some of the midnight black to do a shadow. You want to make sure that you get the shadow from both the bird's feet and also just the shadow that the branch has on its own. So just try to really kind of accentuate those contrasts that you see. Contrasts can really strengthen a painting, and often when I see somebody's painting looks a little flat or a little weak, it's because they haven't really used all their value range. They haven't really pushed those contrasts, and they've kind of stayed on the safe side. You don't want to be on the safe side. You want to really push those colors. And I'm going to scribble some of that black right onto my masking tape because I know I'll need it when I go to liquefy everything. I'm starting with a medium tipped round Derwent water brush here to just add some water to what I've put down on the painting already. I just want to get this really pale wash, and then I'm going to add over it. And here you can see an example of the palette blending I mentioned earlier. You can go ahead and liquefy that pigment and mix it right on the masking tape until you get exactly the color you're looking for. I realized I wanted a little bit of a dark, more reddish brown in my mix, so I scribbled a little bit of that out, and then I can just go ahead and pick it up with the brush. This gives you a chance to kind of audition your colors before you put them on your paper, and it makes it so you can get exactly the tone that you want. Sometimes going right in with a pencil, you only have that one tone of pencil, and it can be very deceiving how it looks going on dry. So being able to put it on wet like I'm doing here really gives you that benefit, just like you were mixing paint on a palette. I'm going to speed up the rest of this layer so you can see how this all goes down without me chopping any bits out. You can see I'm going through and liquefying the dry pigment that we put before and just kind of trying to get that overall even tone. Now, did you see me just kind of put my brush on the edge of the masking tape? What I was doing there was squeezing out a little bit of water. I don't like to squeeze my brush over my painting because I don't want to have a drop fall out. So when I need to add water to the tip of my brush, I often will squeeze it out over a napkin or over that masking tape edge so I can kind of make sure it's even in my bristles and I don't have a big drop of it, which could make a mistake on my painting. What happens with water-soluble products if you get a big drop of water is it can actually lift up too much pigment from the surface of the paper. You want it to keep an even wetness to your brush so that you can liquefy without lifting up. Now this isn't going to look too exciting after just one layer of product is down, so I want you to be aware of that. I call this the hot mess phase or the ugly phase of a painting because it just doesn't have the depth and the layers that we need yet to make it look realistic. Make sure to let that layer dry completely, and then I like to go in with just a regular old soft vinyl eraser and erase any of the original pencil lines I put down. I don't need to erase them completely, but I do want to take any really dark ones away so that they're not distracting as I finish up my painting. I have enough information down with my Graphtint that I don't have to worry about having those original lines there anymore. Now I can start working on some of the details. I like to start with the eyes and beak area. I feel like if you can't capture the personality in an animal's eyes, it can be really difficult to get the rest of the painting to come together. So I'm just going to jump right in and make sure that looks okay first. So I put some dry pigment down, and now I'm going in with the small Derwent water brush and liquefying it and getting some detail in there. I consider the eyes and face of an animal to be the focal point of the picture, so I want to make sure that those details are nice and crisp. So I'm going in with a sharp midnight black pencil and defining and filling in and then liquefying that down with my smallest Derwent water brush. If I can keep some nice crisp detail here, then I know I can let other parts of the design kind of get a little fuzzy and less detailed, but it's still going to look like it has a lot of depth and look really finished. If you have everything to the same level of detail, it can get very flat looking. So having one area as your focal point, nice and crisp, and the rest kind of just supporting that with color and pattern, but maybe not as detailed, it will really give you a nice look and look really put together. Now I'm going to do the rest of this layer in time lapse so you can kind of see how it all goes together without cutting any bits out. And you can see I'm really relying on the scribbled pigment on my masking tape. I feel like working from the palette is much more intuitive for me because I tend to paint more than draw. And you may find that to be a lot easier too. Also, I find it's really easy to control how much pigment I'm getting because you can have a tendency to overdo it when you're drawing it on with a pencil, and then when you're liquefying it, realizing that you have way too much or way too little. So for me, I find this to be a really good device for controlling the pigment. Also, that fine-tipped water brush never needs to be sharpened like a pencil will, and I'm going to get a nice fine point every single time. Just remember to have a paper towel handy to blot that brush off if you need to, or to wipe it off between colors. Although most of the colors we're using here are of a neutral palette, and you really shouldn't need to clean your brush too often. I'll be letting this layer dry while I work on the background. I've started by scribbling some of the dark indigo on my masking tape palette, and I'm picking that up with the flat water brush here. I want to use this because I don't want streaks, I want a nice even wash, and I'm actually kind of painting it so that I have some spaces that may be clouds. This is one way to give a nice natural sky, but you can also fill it all in and lift out clouds later. Now my reference photo didn't have any blue sky. It was kind of an overexposed photo, but I really loved the gesture and the pose of the bird, so I wanted to use it. But I also wanted some more color. Because the bird has so much of that reddish orangey brown in it, I knew having a little bit of a blue tinted sky in the background would really make the bird seem a little bit more lively and vibrant. So that's why I wanted to do that with my background. I'm softening the clouds by using a little bit of water over the edges, and I think this softer, more blended sky looks a little bit better. Now I want to add some more layers, especially to the branch that the bird is perched on. It was a little too light and didn't have enough texture, so I added some brown and black, and now I'm going in with the flat water brush, using it on its chisel edge and wiggling the brush back and forth to get a little bit of texture built up there. I want to get that rougher texture of bark with this layer. Now quickly, while it's still wet, I'm going in with a sharp black pencil and really scratching in some texture of that bark. It's important your paper is wet when you do this so you really can dig in there and give it some texture. And this is really going to give it that rough, barky finish. While the branch is drying, let's skip over to the face again, where we're going to use dry on dry. So my paper is perfectly dry, and I'm using sharp gray pencil to go in and put some of that little feathery texture in here. I've sped it up, probably double speed, just so you can kind of see how it's all going together without me cutting any parts out. Doing a dry layer over this wet layer is going to let you get some fluffy texture and really start to pull the piece together. Most of the time, if a student's not happy with their colored pencil artwork, honestly, the only problem is that it's not done yet, and you just need to keep on layering and keep on going and just put some more time in for it to be finished. When you're working in a limited palette, whether you're doing something in all graphite or all charcoal, or using a muted set of 12 colors like these Derwent Graphtint pencils, it's really important to keep value in mind. Value is simply how light or how dark something is. So you really want to pay attention to your darkest darks, which would be the claws on the bird, the eyes, and the beak. Pay attention to the brightest brights, the tummy where it's a little bit brighter, maybe that little bit on the collar, and make sure that your other elements fall within that spectrum, and also make sure they're in relation to one another. Now, with a really muted palette like this, you can totally stick to the pencils in your kit, or you can add mixed media later. So if you decide that, boy, I'd really like some more brighter yellow, or I would like some orange, or I would like some anything, you can go in and add that with another medium. There's no law that says you have to stick to one tin of supplies. So keep that in mind too. I think a good quality supply should make all of your other art supplies in your stash more valuable and not just replace them. Now here you can see I'm adding some texture over the wings on the back. I'm giving some definition between the feathers. I'm also adding little tufts of feathers on the legs, and I'm giving some texture to the skin of the claws and the toes, getting that detailed. And you know, the more you do, the better it looks. It takes layers, I think, anytime you're working with a pencil medium to make it look finished. So if you're not happy with it, just keep going. It will get better. Don't throw it out because you think it's a hot mess and it's not going to turn around. It totally will, I promise you. Another tip is to not be afraid to sharpen that pencil. If you want detail, you need a sharp pencil. So go ahead, keep those tips sharp, and you will have gorgeous results. Now we are going to go in with a small, round, fine-tip Derwent water brush and selectively liquefy some of the dry layer that we put down. We can also pick up from our masking tape palette if we need to. You don't need to liquefy everything. Where you liquefy, you're going to have a more vibrant color. So leave some of the muted pencil marks. Liquefy some of them. Add some little wisps in. You want to get that multi-layered texture. That's what's going to give it that fluffy appearance like feathers. So just keep that in mind. Don't do everything, do some of it. So you have variety. Variety is what gives you that texture and what makes your artwork really interesting. I think that this painting looks really nice at this stage, and you could definitely call it a day here, but I also really like working with mixed media and I like color. So I wanted to have a little bit more color around the face, on the that sort of area around the mouth, and then also on the talons. I wanted them to be a little bit brighter. So I decided to grab my Inktense pan paints. Those are like the Inktense blocks and pencils, except they're in a handy pan. They're in like a palette, like watercolor, which is what I'm really comfortable with. I also realized that their white, the antique white from Derwent Inktense pan paints, is super opaque. So if I missed any of my bright highlights, if I accidentally added too much pigment, I can go in and I can get my white back this way. So it's kind of a nice little undo button for your mixed media paintings. I'm adding some of the whites back into the feathers of the wing that I missed, and pretty much anywhere else I feel like I need a little bit of a highlight. Now keep in mind, this is totally optional, and you could even remove some of the Graphtint pencil by using an eraser, although the color undertones would probably still remain. I find this is just a kind of a best of both worlds situation for me. Another thing that you can do if you want to just add a little more color or a little more texture is to add some colored pencils. These are the Derwent ChromaFlow pencils, and I really enjoy these for mixed media work over watercolor and over like Graphtint or Inktense. I like these on top because they are opaque and they're very soft, so it doesn't take a lot of work or a lot of pressure to get color to lay down. I also realized that there were some little details I wanted to brighten up, some bright little white wispy feathers I wanted to get in there, and pencils are so nice for that. I can also use the blacks and the whites to make the face a little bit brighter as well, which is something I felt that this particular painting could use. Now, of course, like I said before, you don't have to go mixed media with it. You can just stick with the Graphtint pencils, but it's nice to have those options when you want to add a little bit more to a painting. There's no harm in it whatsoever. The black in this set is also extremely dark, so sharpen it right up and you can go in and pull in those darkest darks. So it just kind of gives you a little bit more of a value range than you might have had, because when you have a water-soluble graphite product, graphite has a little bit of a glare to it and a little bit of a reflection. So even though you put down that midnight black to get your darkest value, it's going to reflect the light a little bit and make it not look so black. So having a black colored pencil like this ChromaFlow can really give you that super, super dark value that you otherwise wouldn't get with just the Graphtint alone. So I like to use it. You don't have to, but I think it's a nice addition to my arsenal of supplies I've been using. And really, that's pretty much all you need to do. I did want to go in and give a little more texture onto the branch because I felt that it could use a little bit more, especially darks. You can kind of see how much lighter it looks now, just the Graphtint, because it's dried and it's starting to bounce light black back. So going in with the black pencil does help you get those darker values, and also you can put that texture down. So I did black and some brown and also some of that light gray color to use as the highlights. I didn't want it super like reflectively bright, but I did want to give a little bit of a lighter value just to make it look a little bit rounder. So between using kind of an ochre color and a gray and a white, I was able to bring that around. And I hope you enjoyed this. This is fun. I really love to see how my supplies play together and come up with something that I'm really happy with. So if you're not happy with the way your picture's coming out, try another medium. And now it's the best time. We get to remove the tape and see our lovely white border, because, you know, it looks all sloppy when we have our tape palette there. So we remove that. We have our beautiful white borders, and we can appreciate this majestic, beautiful bird. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you give it a try with the supplies that you have at home. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have any questions, you can let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.